But this term, man of God, this is a term that is often used to actually mock IFB pastors who seem to have an inflated sense of who they are. But unfortunately, it is true that many pastors have taken this biblical term that is even used to describe a man in the New Testament, and they've kind of weaponized it. And I'm going to show you this because it's so important that you understand this, because I believe we need men of God. We need men of God. It means something to be a man of God, and I want everybody to get a hold of what it is, because we need men of God in this church. But typically, the way this is used, they make it where you can't ever say anything against the pastor in a church when he messes up. Like, how dare you speak that way about the man of God?
Shut your mouth.
And it's interesting the way they do that, because they'll say things. I've heard preachers say stuff like, touch not the Lord's anointed, do my prophets no harm. That's straight out of your Bible right there. And we'll look at that verse. We'll look at that verse. But they'll say, you better watch out what you say about the man of God. And I don't know what it is. There's so much stuff in our IFB culture that, again, I think a lot of this might be foreign to some people, but if you're from the Baptist world, you're familiar with these things, especially if you've been a part of churches south of the Mason-Dixon line. It's like some of y'all, you go home Sunday afternoon, you eat roast preacher.
Shut your mouth.
Well, you better watch talking about the man of God. You leave home, your kids see you doing that, they hear you speaking about God's man that way. Boy, I'd watch out if I were you. Don't be surprised, men, when your wife's not going to submit to you, when you're not going to submit to the one you're supposed to submit to, the man of God in your life. And don't be surprised when your kids won't submit to you, because you won't submit to the man of God in your life. And it's interesting when they choose to use that term, man of God. Okay? And again, it's a biblical term, but I'm going to show you what it means exactly. Because they're not really using it the way the Bible does, but they use it in a very specific way.
And woe unto us as Christians when we cheer on the demise of a man of God. It's wicked.
Touch not mine anointed, and do my prophets no harm. And pastors will use that to defend themselves.
Look, God overthrows the pastor. God overthrows the king. God overthrows those people that are anointed and that are in the positions that He's put them in. It's not up to us to fight against ordained leadership of God. And there's been a lot of stretching forth of hands to touch the Lord's anointed men in the last weeks. And it's just, honestly, just been disgusting to me.
But this is what's happening. Whenever preachers start referring to themselves as the man of God, it's typically a power play. It's typically a defense mechanism and a warning for people to back off. Otherwise, you're going to come under the curse of God.
Shut your mouth. My mouth hath testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed. And, I would say to the people and pastors that are coming out super hard on these current affairs, just be aware of the fact that you are trying to slay the Lord's anointed.
I mean, you really want to do that right now? You really want to go against the man of God? Why don't they just say, you really want to go against me? Why do they switch to the man of God? It's always in a defensive situation. Are you serious? That's what you feel like paying the man of God? When it's something that could benefit him, that's when all of a sudden they switch to that instead of just me. They do that. It's interesting. I've seen this my whole life. And before I go on here, I just want to state a fact, and that is a pastor can be, and a pastor should be, and a pastor better be a man of God. But let me tell you, often they are not men of God. Okay? But there's no denying this is a part of our Baptist culture. I'm sure other religions do it too. I only know Baptists. But in the preacher world, when we're defending another preacher too, it is common practice to refer to them as a man of God, rather than brother or pastor, but we go to the man of God. Like if I want to help my other pastor. Maybe, people in the church haven't been following his leadership. And I want to, instead of me just getting up and say, it's good to follow the leadership of your pastor, typically what I would just naturally do, just because I'm IFB, is I would say, y'all ought to be supporting the man of God. Now, why do we switch to that term? I'm going to show you why, when we are being defensive, people often switch to that term, man of God. There's a really good reason for this. I should say, there's a reason they do it. I don't know if it's a good reason, But what makes us do this? Because again, we put pastor on the sign. We put pastor on a business card, on the website. If man of God is just equivalent to pastor, why don't we just put man of God, Tommy McMurtry, on the sign out there?
Shut your mouth.
I mean, hey, why don't we put that on the website? Why don't I put that on my bio on social media or something like? Why is it that culturally we use that term when being defensive? And the reality is it's a scare tactic. It's a power move. And you can say it's appropriate, but we're going to find out by the end of this message, when are the appropriate times? Again, I'm not saying there's never a time a pastor should not be referred to as a man of God. I think he should be a man of God, but that means something very specifically in the Bible, and I think it's interesting that we never want to use that term until a man of God is being challenged, or especially when there's like some kind of moral failure. Whenever a pastor falls and he commits adultery or some kind of grievous sin and people are wanting to throw him out of the church, you'll have other pastors will step up. Y'all better watch out speaking about the man of God that way. Y'all better watch your treatment of the man of God. And I'm telling you, it's not appropriate. It's not right.
And he said unto his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. And look, I don't care if people say, well, you can't compare David with the pastor or whatever. He's still the Lord's anointed. Yep. That's the point. Yep. Then, and then they're just trying to kill that man of the Lord. That's wicked. That's what he's saying, my hand won't be upon thee. But yet you have pastors whose hands have been upon another pastor and to kill him in the sight of the people. That's what they're trying to do. To kill him in the sight of the people. So, but here's a warning to those that just think it's just okay to just kill the Lord's anointed.
But let's go to Numbers chapter 12. Let's go to Numbers chapter 12, because whenever we switch to the man of God title, again, it's usually because we're being challenged. And here, this is a passage that we all like to preach about. It says, Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses. Whoa. Man, that's dangerous.
Shut your mouth.
What were they thinking, speaking against the man of God? Well, I'm going to tell you a story, ladies and gentlemen, and then they'll go into story time about the person that spoke against the man of God and they were graveyard dead the next day, man. Just scare stories, all right? War stories, they call it. I don't have any of those stories that I'm going to tell right now. But that's how this works. Spoke against the man of God. This was dangerous. Dangerous. Because the Ethiopian woman, yeah, he took another wife, took an Ethiopian. I know they weren't supposed to do that, but don't you speak against the man of God. Yeah, that preacher committed adultery. Who are you to speak against the man of God? Well, look what happened to Miriam. You going to say something against that preacher committing adultery, that preacher being a pervert? Remember, when I'm using my southern accent, I'm not serious, all right? Nobody clip me. Okay, southern accent, I'm not being serious. I'm making fun. Okay? I'm copying stuff that you hear.
Shut your mouth.
And they said, hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? Look at these people thinking they're on equal ground with Moses, thinking they're on equal ground with the man of God. Yeah, that's a lot of arrogance. You got these people that come in church think they can straighten out the preacher, think they can straighten out the man of God. Dangerous. But isn't it interesting how we speak of ourselves in the same terms like we are Moses in these situations? And the thing is too, often preachers do this when there was like legitimate sin that they committed. Okay, it's not just like, it's a disagreement. Maybe there's an argument about doctrine or theology or something like that. No, I'm talking about people who use this when they get nailed and busted for legitimate sin. When there's legitimate wrongdoing being done, and then they try to hide behind this man of God thing. And that's the worst time you should be bringing up the whole man of God thing, when you've done something ungodly. People feel like because they are a pastor that they have this calling on their life. They have this title that's been bestowed on them that no one can take away. And I don't have time to cover all that. But folks, you can be disqualified from being a pastor. You can be disqualified. That's very clear in the scriptures. But because men like Moses didn't lose his position when he would mess up, or King David, that's a completely different thing. It's a completely different thing. It's a completely different position, but people they will try to hide behind these things, and it's a power play.
Shut your mouth. It's not our job to overthrow presidents in our country. It's not our job to overthrow kings in other countries. It's not our job to overthrow people in their offices that God has ordained them to be in. Right. Shut your mouth.